Welcome to the Southeast Retirement Planners podcast, where we will go beyond the balance sheet with our guests, not only to share from our personal experience as financial advisors of over 25 plus years, but also to learn from our guests about the issues and topics that are important to them. Our firm specializes in taking care of the financial plans for individuals and small businesses by helping our clients identify their individual goals and taking a conservative and ongoing approach to helping accomplish them. We are located in Hickory, North Carolina, and look forward to continuing to serve our clients and our community. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to another episode of Southeast Retirement Planners podcast. I'm particularly excited today. We have our first guest who's not a part of our firm, and a good friend and someone that I've worked with for a long time. Dean Cline is here with us today, and you have many, many talents and so much to talk about, and I'm sure a lot of sage advice to pass on to our multitude of listeners and followers and all that.
Absolutely.
But the main crux of what I wanted to do to have you with us today really was to talk about you as a small business owner and how that came about. And it's not just a regular small business, but also a family-run business, and has been for years. And you've kind of made your way over there at one point or another, and you've, I'm sure, tackled a few things. And I thought that might be something helpful for people to be a part of and to hear you share a little bit about. But Dean is a fantastic person. He's a mentor of mine, and a great leader kind of in our community, within our church as well, and in your business. And so super family, outpunted your coverage with your bride, Paige, and you have amazing kids. And it's funny, they're kind of stacked the same as my kids, just 10 years in the future.
That's right.
So that's a lot of our conversations anyway.
Well, thanks for having me, Bob. I appreciate it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So let's jump in.
All right. So why don't you just kind of talk a little bit about what your experience was like. You were an executive with Corning Cable Systems here in Hickory for a long time, and then made a decision to join the family business.
Yeah, executive might be a stretch, but yeah, I when I got out of college, went right into what was then C-Corp and later became Corning Cable Systems, and was there for 11 years. And just really reached a point there that I really felt like I had responsibility but no authority. And I really was meeting with my boss, and he was like, "Hey, you're going to have my job in 5 years," and I realized I didn't want it. And so around that time, the opportunity just came up to leave what was the corporate world, and what's good about that, but also what's not so good about that. There is a semblance of security, but in reality, it's not really there. Soon after I left in 2001, and soon thereafter, the telecom bubble burst.
Right. And
so the workforce in Hickory got let go. I may have been with them, I'm not sure. And went into business with my father at that time. I think he was 62 or so, and was really at the point he wanted to do something different or do less, or maybe not sure. And so I jumped in, and that was, 2001, so it was 20 years ago. And
that's
so
kind of wild.
I've been in a small business.
But the businesses are similar. I mean, you went from Corning, which was
very similar,
high-tech, fiber optic cable, like
absolutely.
A lot of global presence, and then Cline Associates. Are they similar?
Is not.
They're not. Okay.
Yes, it would be the exact opposite. So very small. I should know, but I think we have 17 or 18 employees. I count them and then I forget. So there's 17 or 18 employees. Company will be actually 30 years old next year, which I thought about recently, which is a really long time. A small business is hard to keep afloat. And, cash flow being poor for a short amount of time can end you very quickly. And then you have COVID, and we're in the, quickly, we're just in the convenience store business, for lack of a better term. We're a manufacturer's rep agency. And so we sell, if you go in a convenience store, if you've ever been in one.
How can we support Cline and Associates is the question.
It's so easy. So eat things and drink things that typically are not really good for you, but taste great and make you feel great in an 8-state region. So from Kentucky and Virginia in the north down to Miami and over through Alabama. If you go in a convenience store, you have a Slim Jim, you have some sunflower seeds from Biggs or David's, a honey bun. There's a chance that it's a Cline Associates product. So it's funny. I mean, I make jokes about it because it is what it is, but it's really created an amazing life for me. Just being truthful about it. Put kids through college, and so it's been a tremendous blessing. So that change for me from the corporate world to the small business was absolutely the best thing for me.
Well, just a quick, I just thought about this. There may be a way to kind of send in an answer, but at one point you told me it was the most stolen item in a convenience store.
Oh, yeah.
We'll come back to that. But
Okay.
You can, while we're talking for our listeners, you can guess on what is the item that is most frequently stolen from a convenience store. And I'd be willing to bet you would never guess it. And once you find out, you'll scratch your head wondering why that is. But we can get into that.
Absolutely.
Well, so going from the corporate environment, whatever 401k plan, you've got a sales team, you do a lot of traveling, you do all that kind of stuff. And like you say, you felt like some relative security there. What was Cline Associates like when you came in?
Yeah, so obviously it had been successful. It was almost 10 years old. My father had a partner, and as I learned, the only ship that's destined to sink is a partnership, and it did. And so he was by himself. The office was in my parents' home. In what was my old bedroom that
Really?
was probably it should have been a closet, but it was a bedroom, and probably a 12 by 12 room, and that was the office. My mom processed the orders, and there was no admin. I think there were 2 salespeople, and then we had, I believe at that time, there were a couple of people that did some retail work. So if we needed something done in a convenience store group, they could go in and execute putting a rack up or putting some tags up. So that was it. And I decided pretty much immediately I wasn't going to move into an office in my old bedroom. So we moved to an office space in Hickory that we rented that was small. And I went from being, as you said, an executive, which I wasn't, but at Corning, I was what was called a global account manager. So it sounded better than it was in reality, but I went from that.
Titles are important.
Titles are very important, which is why now I don't have one. If you get my business card, it only has my name on it.
It does? Is that right?
I took my title off for whatever it was going to be.
Whatever your title was going to be?
I removed it. But yeah, I went from that to literally answering the phone, filing, and doing company emails and processing orders for probably 2 years. So I started at, I was early 30s at that time, and I started at what would be the most entry-level job that would exist in our company today.
Yeah.
And so that was it. That was where I started.
It's kind of interesting to me, through the years, all the conversations we've had about your business and really the things you like to do outside of your business and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of times people will look at a situation like where you are now and where Cline Associates is now, which, by the way, your dad is retired from the business, I guess officially, although he's still around and he, still has his thumbprint on a lot of things.
Sure.
You have other family that's involved in the business now as well. And, that can be treacherous, right?
It can be.
I mean, being a small business owner on your own can be treacherous to your own sort of my own mental health, my family, all that. It can be a challenge. It comes with a lot of benefits, but it can certainly be difficult. Working with family can be especially treacherous, right?
Yes, and I think if you talk to anyone in a small family business, everyone inside the organization has the best of intentions. You love each other, you like each other, your family. There's a high level of loyalty, but there's just something about it because there's a personal component that you just don't have with someone else you hire.
Yeah.
And so if something goes kind of remotely wrong, it just feels worse.
Well, I think it's like the risk is higher, right? So, I mean, one of the things I equate it to is the idea of if I put a balance beam on the floor and asked you to walk across it, you would have whatever, athletic attributes that allow you to do that with relative ease.
Sure.
But I put the same balance beam, 35 feet up in the air, and now it requires no different athletic, situation, but now the risk is far greater of falling.
Yeah, I would
right?
struggle in either environment, I have a feeling. But yeah, and I went from, when I went into business with my dad, we just didn't know what we were doing. And so you make a lot of mistakes that you don't even imagine would be there. And so I really do think, I think there's a business somewhere, maybe when I retire, just helping small family businesses, because they're, once you get into them and then you talk to other people who are in them, I mean, you end up with a lot of horror stories. And so...
And they've got to be a lot of similar stories.
There are a lot of similar stories. They're about, and mine isn't unique in that you have a first generation entrepreneurial starter of the business. And whenever you have that, the transition from that generation to the second is very difficult because it's
for a lot of reasons.
It's their baby.
Yep.
It has to be your life, because for it to survive, it has to be your life. And then because of that, as it becomes a smaller part of your life, that becomes very difficult. And I think that's probably universal. And then as the second generation, how you deal with that, I probably did it very poorly, I would guess. But I didn't even know what was happening.
All right. So when you talk about that, and we'll get into, you're working with other family members now,
right?
And we'll kind of go to that in a minute. But when you talk about what that was like to transition into the business underneath your dad, who started it, it was his baby, it was his life, and then, and it's tough. I mean, father-son too is very tough, right?
And you're
it's
alike.
Tough to kind of it's kind of outlive, your all the past baggage and the assumptions and expectations for years and years, right? What would be one of the things or a couple of the things that sort of advice? I know that a lot of it's really around communicating and kind of having a plan.
Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah. I mean, that might be its own 4-part series. There's so many mistakes that I made and probably we made. And the only way I can really answer your question is I subsequently started a third generation in the company. So my son, who's 25, is with me. And so...
And incidentally, also left a corporate environment.
Actually, a corporate.
Well, you tried to talk him out of it.
Yeah, a corporate telecom environment. So
That's
I was
right.
at Corning, he was at CommScope, and I did everything I could. Literally the opposite of trying to talk someone into a job. I sat him down and listed probably 25 reasons to not do it, and physically walked through, made him listen to every one. Please don't do it. Don't do it. But, his position was, in his young life, he's 25, is that this is what he's always wanted to do. Now, whether or not,
Slim Jims.
yeah, being a small, fickle, troublesome, everybody laughs.
Essential business.
It is essential. Sugary drinks and sugary treats are essential, I feel like. But I think expectations are, and how you set those and how you communicate those up front is the most important thing. So
Okay, so how did you do that with him?
Literally,
Besides telling him all the reasons why he shouldn't,
Yeah.
but then he said, look, I hear you, and he's a smart kid,
yeah,
young man.
Yeah.
He's not a kid anymore, but he's like, I hear you, and this is still what I want to do, and I think we can do this together.
yeah.
And I understand the risks, right? That's basically, I mean, he said that
Yeah.
in writing, I think.
He
right?
did, and for me, it was about, okay, what if it doesn't work?
Right.
So it's kind of walking through the worst of expectations. Like if he's thinking it's going to be the best job he's ever had, and I'm thinking, I know how it can go sideways really quick. So I said early on, as his dad, if you get a better job opportunity, I'm going to make you take it. Or if you decide you don't like it, I'm going to help you find another job. It really wasn't a question on my part. I couldn't. It's hard in our industry. It's an older industry. It's hard to find people to come into it that want to do it. It's also not easy. So for me, there was no way I could hire someone that young, that college educated, and that loyal.
Right.
I couldn't go out and find it.
Yep.
So it was all around a good deal for me. The issue was just, for him, was it going to be a good deal? And I had to go into it from a mental standpoint of saying, now the reason I am here is for him. And really, I'm there for everybody who works there. So I try not to have a culture where I'm a boss. Matter of fact, I don't like, people will say, if we're introduced, this is my boss, Dean. And I'm like, I'll get them after that and be like, please don't say it. It makes me really uncomfortable.
Do you like boss man? Like
Yeah,
if I
that's
were
what
to
I.
say,
Yeah,
this
that's what I was.
boss
really,
man.
I was really looking more
better?
for that. But I'm like, we work together, and so my strategy, and I'm older. I'm 52. Is in support of the people who work there, and try to make their life better and try to take care of them. But now, you mentioned my sister's also there, so there's family members, and so there's an increased responsibility on my part to take care of them.
Sure.
And so that's really the environment. He's been there a year and a half.
So what did you do differently when he came in? I mean, did you guys kind of have a contract? Did you have kind of an agreement? Like if somebody were considering going into business with their father or their mother, or starting a small business with their children in mind or whatever, I know you did a few things differently, but
Yeah, really, we put rules in place.
Okay.
If I had to pick anything we did that I can remember off the top of my head, we put rules in place, and they weren't things that I came up with. They were things I'd read or people I'd listened to that had advice on family businesses. And so, just one of those examples would be how we talk to each other in the business environment. So I'm obviously dad to him, had been dad to him for 23 and a half years. At work, I'm Dean.
From him.
from him,
Okay.
which is really uncomfortable, honestly. And truthfully, now he does it more out of work because we're in work so often. So
Yeah.
but that's so that it's really for the other people in the business or in a meeting. So
All right, that sounds like when I think about kind of a takeaway or a
Yeah.
key point, like that sounds like a pretty insignificant detail. And it also feels awkward, I'm sure. But
yeah,
we've talked about this before, and I've talked about it with Adam. That's a pretty significant detail that really makes a difference, doesn't it?
yeah, because we're delineating the work environment and the home environment, and really what you don't want to do, what most likely would happen is the work environment creeps into the home environment or to your personal life, and then you only have work. And so when you're
Yeah,
together,
you can't separate
you
it.
can't separate it. And so he calls me Dean at work, and that's so if we're in a meeting, everybody gives their opinion, and he doesn't say, "Hey, Dad, I think we should do this," and then all of a sudden it trumps everybody else's opinion first. And then secondly, the thing we do is we protect outside of work. So if we're outside of work, we can only talk about work if we both agree to it. And the terminology is, I say, "Hey, Adam, is it okay if I put the work hat on?" And he can just say no. Now, the reality of it is I never say that because I don't want
You
to
don't
talk
want to talk about
I don't want to talk about work. But he'll say, we'll be together on a Saturday or somewhere, and he'll say, "Can I put the work hat on?" And I would say 75% of the time I say no. No.
Just table it.
Just table it. There's nothing that important that we've got to talk about it on Saturday.
But so that's interesting. I mean, and quirky in a way that you do that, but that is something that you implemented specifically. You
Oh, yeah.
talked about it, you agreed on it ahead of time. Dean at work, Dad at home, no work at home unless we both are in a place where like that's okay, we can talk about it.
And that actually, both of those came from, it's a Dave Ramsey principle. And he has, I think, his daughter and maybe her husband or son-in-laws or whatever. And it's been relatively successful. I'm sure it's not without some trouble. But those two things came from him. And I really wish, and there are probably other things I need to implement, but they're just guardrails that keep you. I don't know that they keep you from not having problems, but even with my sister, who's been with me, I would say for 6, 7, 8 years, I can think of one instance we've had that was our feathers were ruffled slightly, but very minimal,
Yeah,
and that's what we're after.
that's right. So you also didn't just learn this on your own. I think you mentioned Dave Ramsey. I know through the years you have been a proponent and advocate of training,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because you and I have talked about this through the years, and the way you've helped me with my business. That there are a lot of people out there that are maybe a lot smarter than I am about some of these things, and so. What is some of the stuff that you've invested in? I feel like that's another really important piece, particularly for small business owners, is to invest in yourself in terms of training and understanding how to be a better leader.
Well, I found out a lot of things late in my life after messing a lot of things up, I feel like. And so I'm not like I did a Clifton's strength analysis, which is just one of those things that tell you about yourself. And I knew it all along, but one of my top 2 or 3 is learner. I like to learn new things, and that gives me energy. But I was probably 12, 13 years into kind of running a company and had my head down, just grinding away at just day to day, trying to make it work, and wasn't learning anything, and realized I really just kind of had an epiphany and just said, I'm not smart enough to be doing what I'm doing. Like, I'm doing it, but there's other families responsible. I'm responsible for other families, and they're counting on me, and I'm just not that smart at some things.
Yeah.
And I have pride like everybody else does, but I don't have a lot because I've just had a lot of things go poorly. And so that tends to wring the pride out of you over time. And so I just kind of reached a point. I was like, I've got to learn. I got to, where can I go? And Dave Ramsey does an entree leadership. It's kind of just part of his program that's part of his empire. And he takes entrepreneur and leadership and kind of combines it and has these events. I went to one. He has speakers, and it forces you to read. It forces you to take notes. It forces you to invest. These are, whatever, $1,500 to get in one, and you got to pay to get there. And I'm one of the people that if I'm going to give you my money, because I think I'm frugal. My wife would say I'm cheap, but I'm frugal. Like
tight
would be that's a great title. But if I'm going to invest, I'm going to go do it well. And I went to one. I started, reading the books of the authors that were there. I saw John Maxwell there, who's a leadership guy.
He's like preeminent
leadership guy. I mean, he's written, probably over 100 books, I would guess, over time. And so I just went down this path probably for 5 years, really deeply in trying to get better and trying to eliminate the blind spots that I had, either in just my personal skill set. What am I really bad at that I could get better at? Hiring better, how to manage people better. And what I really found, which was enlightened me at the time, is that you can get better. That like if you intentionally, it's just like with anything else. And that, hey, if you lift weights, you'll get stronger. Or if you do dribbling drills, you get better at basketball. It's like, okay, I can actually read, listen to podcasts, go see people, and I can be a better husband. I can be a better father. I can be a better business manager, a better investor. All those things are available. And I think just as we get beaten down over time, as we get older, we forget that it's okay for us to learn, for us to invest in ourselves, for us to spend money on ourselves to get better. And for me, it really was a fork in the road. And I plan on doing that really forever.
It's interesting. I just heard something the other day that stuck with me about just kind of culture in general today versus a generation ago maybe, and how so many people are afraid to be a beginner at something.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They're afraid to be a newbie. They're afraid to be a novice. They don't want, and there's something that's so, I look at so much just from a sports standpoint, from my background, there's something that's invigorating about that. Like, it's not always the best thing to show up and already have it figured out. And there's so much you can learn by learning. And when you're a beginner at something, when you're willing to kind of humble yourself a little bit and say, hey, I need to get better in these areas, or if you don't even know what areas, to be able to go and say, let me figure out where my blind spots are, where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are. There's so many tools out there that give you access to that.
Yeah, and I would say back to my business, probably one of the greatest advantages to have a young person come into my business like my son, who I do think is really smart. He's college educated. His degree was in supply chain, and he worked in supply chain at CommScope, so he had experience. He'd done plant audits but he comes in to at that point a 28-year-old older business, and just started saying, why would you do this way? And I was like, that's a great question. And I personally like change, sometimes just for the sake of change, but I really like change.
That's not healthy.
It's not healthy. But if I think it can bring like 1 degree of improvement, I'll change it.
Yeah.
And so just somebody looking at it and asking the questions, because you get blind.
Sure.
You do things the same way, so I think for me, those are all, and I still find myself tending to go back to an old habit and not hey, it's time to
comfortable.
Let's get it. Let's get a new. Who's a new author? Who's a new? And I've read a few things and gotten really interested in those, and so it's sparked some of that again.
Well, so I think we're going to have to wrap up shortly.
Sure.
But one of the things, we've worked together professionally for a while, and I've had a friendship for a long time that sort of spans all that, and our families are very close and that sort of thing. So I feel like one of the areas when you kind of talk about things you're good at, things you're not good at, and places that you invest, it's one of the things you've said to me through the years is like, look, this is not my area. This is your area in terms of your financial plan and that sort of thing. How is that something that's kind of affected the way that you look at that and sort of evaluate the success of it?
That was a deep question. So let's just chew it up a little bit at a time. So I have a thought process that is I should only do the things that only I can do. There's only so much time.
Yeah.
Okay. And so even in the work environment, what are the things that only I can do in my company, and then me do those and do them as good as I possibly can, and then delegate the things that not necessarily anybody could do. I don't want to say they're not important, but that somebody else can do. And financially, my whole theory around money is just really that I didn't want to run out. It really was never try to amass a huge amount of money one way or another, but I was a single income dad with 3 children, and I'm a planner. And so I wanted them to be able to go to college. I wanted to keep, make them, help them not get into debt, all those things. So I really was just worried about not running out of money and being able to provide. And so I bounced around probably with just financial advisors and people that manage my money. The key for me is I really don't want to worry about it, but then on occasion I do worry about it.
You do.
Okay, so
I get late night emails.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go a month and not really pay any attention, and then I'll get worried about something. And so, I want a relationship with a financial planner that's really a couple things, that really knows who I am, so that when I do that and I kind of flinch and seem like I'm freaking out about something, that understands where that's coming from, that it's not like, I don't think you don't know what you're doing. It's this, I'm worried about where the world's headed.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Which I can't fix for you.
You can't. And there's a lot of problems with the world that continue to happen. So there's that, but the second piece of that is just to understand who I am and what about money or saving or wealth matters to me. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's really important. So it's kind of like a holistic approach. And it's been probably easier for us because we're friends. We've known each other for a long time. But I think you take that approach with every client that you have, because that's kind of who you are. But yeah, the why behind the money is more important than the money.
Yeah, and it's a requirement to do the money side well. You got to understand the why.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: what is the worst financial advice you've ever been given? Worst piece of advice or decision, financial decision you've ever made?
Okay. The one that comes to mind,
like a mistake.
Yeah,
perhaps.
The one that comes to mind would be a situation where I didn't get any advice.
Okay.
And so when I was at Corning, telecom was just banging. I mean, we were in what's called an over-demand situation, because you could sell all you could make and then some.
And it was sold.
You had contracts a year in advance to get product you're making in a year. So Corning stock was going up, and it was incredible. I mean, it was just fantastic. I was just so happy. And it went up like I'm not exaggerating. It went up $10, $15 a day, $25 a day. It went up to $330, and this would have been, in the late 90s.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
and somebody should write a book. Maybe they did. And it split, and so I had 3 times the shares at $110, and I was managing it myself.
Good. Well, that is something that
Made perfect sense to me at the time. And then it started to go down. But it's been great, and it's going to it went down, $20, and then it'll go right back up, and then it went down $20, and then I was like, well, it's down 40 now. I can't get out of it. It's going to go back up. Now I've lost too much, and to cut to the chase, I wrote it down to $1.50.
Oh my gosh, from $110.
From $110 to $1.50.
And at the time, that was all of your investable asset.
Yeah, and then
all of it.
Yeah,
right?
I would have had what would have then been. I don't even remember. I've blocked it from my memory. It would have been tens of thousands of dollars. I would have guessed at that time, which was 25 years ago. So had I kept it, I don't know what it would have been, but it would have been a lot better than what it is now, because I ended up leaving the company and it was at $1.50, and that stock, the last time I looked at it, it's been probably 5 years ago, it was $20. So it rebounded quite a bit, but never, I just didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't understand
Volatility.
The volatility of, and dollar cost averaging, buy in, weekly or monthly. That way you buy in when it's low. And all I did was bought in, rode it to the top, and then rode it all the way back down. And just didn't know enough to even ask for advice or say, raise my hand. And I was just embarrassed probably. So I would guess that cost me $100,000 if it cost me a penny, because over time,
and then some, sure,
and then some.
Yeah.
So really,
more than that, maybe a lesson learned.
Oh,
so
idea.
that's good. I mean, that's not the work. What's then to be more positive? What is maybe the best financial decision?
That one's easy for me. And that goes back to, I don't know what the word you used. Was it frugal? No, I used frugal. Tight was the word you used. I have been debt averse my entire life. And I had a strategy and have had a strategy during my entire adult life to get out of debt. And really out of, not because I want to, go to, live in, the Caribbean somewhere. It was just, I was afraid that at some point somebody would come and take my house. So I didn't want that to happen. And so every chance I had with anything, I paid down my debt. And so I drove my cars for 8 to 10 years. I'd pay them off in 4 years, drive them for 6 more. And so I had a strategy, and when I think back on all the strategies I've had, I don't know if I can't remember what was really successful or not, but I had a strategy to get out of debt by the time I was 50, and I did.
You did? We've been working on that for a while.
And I would say that is, outside of the things that are much better accomplishments, getting married, having kids, and all the things that we all know. But that's been the greatest life change for me, is knowing my kids' college was paid for and I was out of debt, and the feeling that I had where I could exhale and just say, whew, okay.
So I remember that, by the way, because it wasn't long ago.
No, it wasn't.
It was just a few years ago. And, we've had this conversation when we've met through the years, and I've had this conversation with multiple clients. So much of what I like to do is get into the numbers and the projections and the expectations and the rates of return and all those kinds of things, whatever the risks might be. And you can quantify being debt free on paper. You can see what that looks like to work towards that. But what you cannot see on paper is what you just talked about, is the feeling. I remember I sent you guys a little note, and I think, and just congratulating you. That's a remarkable thing, particularly in today's environment. It's not something that's talked about enough, but it's a remarkable feeling to do that, to make that step from having all of your assets and your income and your resources have a requirement on them, but now they don't.
Absolutely. And I hadn't rented in 25 years or whatever, but my kids had, and I had friends, at church that rented, and rent was $800. It's a reasonable rent. I was paying it in Raleigh for my kids. My mortgage was not much higher than that. It was $1,000. That's what my mortgage was, because I had refinanced and refinanced.
Right.
I rode that down, went to a 15-year loan, everything I could to minimize the interest, got it to $1,000. But then what happened was, when you pay that off, and I still think about it today, because I'm still, if I want to buy something, I still think about it, because I'm just trained for that. Like if I want some new shoes, I'm just like, do I really need the new shoes? Do I not need the new?
You have a higher level of comfort buying a new car than you would buying a new pair of shoes for yourself.
100%.
Right.
I don't really
Which is
know.
bizarre.
I don't really know why, but that is true. But I still think today, if I give myself approval to buy the thing, because I know I didn't spend the $1,000 on the mortgage.
Yeah.
So the $100 that I spend on something, or we go to a nicer dinner, or I want to give to something. There's a GoFundMe comes out, or something happens and somebody needs something. I can say with confidence, I can give $200, and I know that it doesn't have an effect on anything else.
Yeah.
And for me, there is a tangible money component of that, because I think I have earning power beyond now. I'm 52. So there's a tangible piece to that I care much less about.
Yeah.
The intangible, just freedom of that, and it's a Ramsey pillar, and that is, save like no one else, so you can give like nobody else. And so for me, I did that for 50 years, and now I can flip that switch. And if there's something that I want to give to, and I do believe 100% for anybody who's listening or watching, the joy really isn't in getting the money. The joy is really in giving the money away.
Yeah, there's such a freedom in that
there's a whole nother story
behind
that. Yeah, there's a whole nother story behind that. Yeah.
Well, man, thank you so much. I know there's some good nuggets in there. Some of your experiences going into a small business, running a successful small business, and also just the involvement of your family. A lot of lessons to be learned there. Thank you for your friendship and your guidance through the years as well. I always appreciate that and get a chance to spend time with you. But thanks for coming on our podcast as our first guest.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was very exciting for me.
It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me. And for anybody listening or watching, check out Bob if you need help with your finances or just in life in general.
Yeah, and you can get all of our information on seretirementplanners.com on our website. Make sure to, wherever you're listening to us or watching us, just click like, click subscribe. Those things are really important, I'm finding out in the podcast world. So make sure that we know people are out there tuning into what we have to say. But thanks again for your time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA, SIPC. Southeast Retirement Planners is not affiliated with LPL Financial or registered as a broker-dealer or investment advisor.